Howdy folks, welcome back to Subsonic Sunday episode 2. Today we're going to develop a load for 300 blackout. We need a subsonic load that's going to work in both my 16-inch bolt gun and my 8-inch AR platform. We're using the 200 grain Sierra Match King projectile and Hodgdon CFE black for powder. We're going to target 1,050 feet per second for our velocity to make sure we stay under the speed of the sound barrier. So today's video we will shoot a series of different charge weights and determine what is the optimal charge weight to push this 200 grain bullet as close to 1050 as possible out of the 16-inch while still operating the 8-inch reliably. Alright, here we go on this soggy Sunday. Alright, we're going to dive into some of the specifics for why we're making today's video. So, in 300 blackout I have these two different guns here. So basically for these two guns, as far as factory ammunition, I'm using two different things. This S&B 200 grain bullet subsonic ammo. This is the cheapest and most widely available subsonic ammo I can find. So 200 grains, that's pretty similar to this Hornady subsonic. This is supposed to be an expanding bullet. Results seem to vary on that, but it does expand at least a little bit. So this is 190 grain, but my experience has taught me in these two guns the point of impact is very, very similar. So I use these two interchangeably depending on what I'm doing. This is much more expensive and would be used for specific purposes like defense or hunting. This is just for practicing. So with these two having a similar point of impact, what we're trying to do today is to develop a load, and we've done some preliminary testing that tells us that this 200 grain Sierra Match King shoots very well in both of my guns, and it's the same weight as the S&B. And our favorite 300 blackout powder is Hodgdon CFE black. It's optimized, as it says here, for 300 blackout subsonic, but it does some other things too. It's great powder for this. It creates enough pressure at these subsonic loadings to cycle this style gun just fine. So the first test we're going to perform is we're going to load up several different loadings, and we're going to see how much powder it takes to efficiently cycle this action. For those of you who don't know how this type of a gun works, basically the way it works is when you fire around, the bullet's traveling down the barrel, and behind that bullet, gas pressure is building up because this bolt hasn't unlocked yet. This rotating bolt will delay the unlocking action, so no pressure is escaping the back until this bullet has passed through here, through this gas port up here, which has a little hole in the top of the barrel that allows gas pressure to come back down this tube and enact the pressure on this bolt carrier group. And that is actually, instead of being direct blowback, the pressure from here pushing this back, it's the gas pressure from this tube coming back down that enacts forces on this bolt carrier group to make it cycle and load the next round. So we'll be seeing how much powder it takes to efficiently actually cycle this, so we'll determine the threshold. Now, we've already determined through some previous testing with these two bullet combinations that somewhere between 11 and 11.5 grains is optimal. So we are going to test from 11 to 11.5, starting at 11, seeing if that's enough powder to actually cycle the action. We're just going to keep going until we determine our threshold of where this gun will start or stop cycling correctly. Okay, and the next thing we need to know is because this barrel is a 16-inch barrel compared to this gun's 8-inch, we need to, and with a longer barrel, you have a longer time for gas pressures to build up, and therefore more velocity. In a bolt gun like this, none of the gas is being siphoned off to cycle in action or anything. All of it is contained in the barrel until the projectile leaves the muzzle. So you're going to get twice the amount of time for pressures to build up and therefore more velocity. In order to stay subsonic, we're targeting around 1,000 feet per second, maybe 1050. That'll ensure that we stay subsonic in all the different weather and altitude conditions we might be shooting in, because that sound barrier will hover around a little bit. So, whatever we determine as our threshold for this, we need to test those rounds in this gun. We'll use the chronograph to get some velocities and make sure that we're staying under that 1050 velocity range. So that'll be the second test. Okay, and then the third thing we're going to do is once we've kind of settled on a load that both cycles in this one and gets as close to that 1050 target range as we can in this gun, then we will shoot to confirm out of this gun, maybe this gun as well, but it's more important in here. This is a less precise platform with a red dot and a shorter barrel. We're using this for closer in stuff. This we will shoot a little bit farther out with a little more precision, so we need to confirm that our hand load that we worked up has a very similar point of impact to both of these factory rounds. That way we can use all three interchangeably. Ideally, we will stop buying this all together once we have our hand load perfectly dialed in. We'll just make our own practice style ammo, and it'll be much cheaper and probably more accurate than this stuff is anyway. These are fantastic bullets, these Match Kings. So that's the overall goal. We're going to do a few different loads and a few different tests, and we'll bring you along for the ride, and hopefully we can settle on some good data for both of these guns. Alright, here we are at the bench. First we're going to load up a test to check the cycle and function in the AR. So I know from experience that 11.4 and 11.5 grains, they will cycle just fine. We've shot those loads before. So we are going to shoot 11, 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3. I'm only going to do 3 of each. That'll give us enough to do a single shot to see if the bolt locks back, and then 2 more to just confirm function. So I'm going to be loading all of these by hand to make sure I get the charges exactly right. I have my scale here, and I'm just going to use a dipper to dip some of this CFE black into the pan to measure. So yep, here we go. Let's get started loading 3 of each of those charge weights. Okay, we've got all the charge weights measured out. They look about right. Visually confirm we have no double charges, nothing weird. Now we're going to go ahead and get bullets placed on top of these before we spill anything. And now it's time to seat the bullets. Going to be shooting for 2.5, just under 2.25, just under maximum magazine length here. Alright, let's see what we got. Alright, there we go. We have it at 2.253. That'll work. Let's check one more. .257. That's fine. Now we'll just get the rest of these seated and out to the proper length. Okay, there we have our 4 different loads, and they're ready to go test. Okay, here we are for our first test. This may prove to be a fairly short test. We'll see. We're going to start with the lowest charge weights and see what will cycle the AR. So we're only going to shoot as much as we need to. Once we determine that it is cycling fine, then we'll just save the rest of those for our velocity test. So with that said, let's get started with 11 grains. First thing we're going to do is shoot one single round and see if the bolt locks open. So we'll get up close, so hopefully you can have a view of that. Okay, 11 grains locks the bolt open. By way of confirmation, we are just going to shoot 2 more rounds here and be absolutely sure that it's functioning. Alright, seems fine. That's as far as we need to go. Alright, here we are set up to do some velocity tests. For the sake of time, we're just going to test the remaining from our first loading session there. So 11.1 grains, 11.2 grains, and 11.3 grains. We should be able to extrapolate 11.0 from 11.1. We're pretty sure that's under the velocity we're looking for, so no big deal. If we need to reload that or 11.4 at the top end and check the speeds on those, we will, but for the sake of time we're going to test these 3 loads as well as confirm the velocity of the S&B 200 grain loads. Alright, so first up is 11.1. Alright, interesting results. Those were higher velocities than I was expecting for 11.1 grains. That's interesting. Okay, we're going to shoot the factory S&B loads, 200 grains, see what we get there, just to compare to our 11.1 charge that was hotter than we expected, and we should know where to go from there. Alright, let's give this a shot. Okay, now we're going to test the Hornady 190 grain subs for velocity as well. Okay, the last thing we're going to test is the 11.2 grain load in the AR, just to get a ballpark on velocity for that. So here we go. Alright, so what does all this mean? For one, it means we screwed up a little bit. So, with our first test with the AR, we started at 11 grains, and it functioned just fine. No problem, locked the bolt back and everything, so there was no need to test anything higher. We had plenty of gas for that. So, then we moved on to testing the 11.1 charge in the bolt gun, and that came back too fast, like, 75 feet per second faster than what we were looking for, and it was not subsonic. We could hear it crack. You can hear it crack in the video. It's kind of interesting if you watch the velocities and listen to the shots. You can kind of hear about where that sound barrier is hovering for the day. Okay, so basically too hot. We need to go less than 11. We know that. We also tested the Hornady factory load, and the S&B load. The Hornady was not subsonic either out of the 16-inch. It was a little warmer than we thought. And the S&B coming in at 1,010 feet per second, that was subsonic, that was quiet, that was what we were expecting. So these two factory loads aren't as close as we thought. So we're gonna have to test that further in another episode. So what are we gonna do now? I guess that leaves another test. We'll do similar tests here with these different charge weights. We'll start at 10.6 and go up to 10.9. We'll test for function in the AR, and we'll test for velocity in the 16-inch. So with that being said, time to get loading. Function test with our reloads here. We're going to start with 10.6 grains and see if that'll lock the bolt back. And if it does, that's all the testing we'll need to do. Alright, so first up, 10.6 grains. Lock the bolt back just fine. See there. Alright, we're gonna just shoot 10.6 and see if it locks the bolt back. Just for one more verification shot here. We'll try to get a close-up of it. All good. Alright, here we go for some more velocity testing. We're gonna start with the 10.6 grain load and fire that, get some data, and we'll go as high as we need to until we reach around 1050 or so. Alright, let's give it a shot. Alright, we were low on the speed for that one, so we're going to move on to 10.7 grains. Alright, we had one that was pretty slow there, bringing our average down a little bit. But yeah, we need to move on to 10.8 grains. See what we get there. Alright, I'm not sure why we got lower velocities there. No idea at all, unless that we're just behind a cloud and it's making the chronograph read a little different. Let's move on to 10.9 and see what happens. Alright, so here we are looking at some averages from those groups. Our 10.8 average, it's kind of low. That one came out weird, probably because of the chronograph. And we had one really low shot in our 10.7 group, which brought that one down. But really, the 10.7 average was as close to the S&B as we could get. 1014, 1023, 1022, and 1017. Those are all good. We just had one weird shot in there. I'm gonna blame the big standard deviations on my brass being really old. Probably it's been used a lot. It's never been annealed. It's probably getting kind of brittle. So we're thinking 10.7 is our choice. So we're gonna load up some 10.7s. And then we're going to shoot them to test the point of impact shift between the S&Bs and the Hornadies. And hopefully we're honing in on a solution. We're pulling for 10.7. Alright, here we are. We're going to shoot our POI shift test. We've got 5 shots of our 10.7 grain hand load, our Hornady expanding, and our S&B 200 grain Subsonic. So we've got a target set up downrange. We're going to fire 5 shots at each and check the accuracy as well as the point of impact. Okay, we're going to start with at the top left corner. We're going to start with the S&Bs. Next up we have the Hornadies. We're also going to listen to these and see if we can go Subsonic. We're wanting to the other day. Most definitely Supersonic. Stayed set. Okay, last up, 10.7 grain hand loads. Alright, here we are in for a closer look at the target. This first group here is our S&B load, this one right here. This second group here, this is our Hornady's, these right here. And this group here in the middle, that's our hand load. So what is this telling us? Accuracy wise, not a whole lot. We weren't really on the most stable of rests. We didn't really take that much of our time. We wanted to simulate offhand shooting more or less, resting against a branch, something like that, like you would be in a hunting situation. So we didn't go for absolute accuracy here. We will test that in the future once we start playing with different bullets for our hand loads. But that being said, we can see that the center of this group is about, I would say, 1.5 inches below point of aim. So that's for the S&Bs. Over here, it looks like we are probably 1/2 inch above point of aim for the center of this group. What's interesting about this Hornady group when I shot it is you could hear it, that this one shot down here, this was the only one of them that didn't go supersonic, and the rest did, and they all landed in a nice tight group up here. Interesting. Then down to our hand loads. If we look at it, we're going to say about 1.5 inches to the center of this group, right here at these two. So, to sum it all up, basically for our suppressor shooting and Subsonic 300 blackout, we're going to use 10.7 grains of Hodgdon CFE black and a 200 grain Sierra Match King with CCI number 41 primers to match our S&B loads. We were using S&B brass for our reloads as well. We seem to have dialed in the point of impact. It's pretty much spot on between the two at 50 yards, which is where I zero the rifle. So that's a good thing. We've found a load that works in both the AR and the bolt gun. So the one thing that didn't work is the Hornady Subsonics. These Subsonics, they were just not staying under the sound barrier, getting upwards of 1100 feet per second, and you're hearing that crack. So these we probably will discontinue use in the bolt gun and reserve them strictly for the AR, which we were getting about 1070, and they seem to be staying subsonic. So that works for the AR still. So it'd be interesting to test the point of impact shift between our hand load and our Hornady in the AR and see if there's much of a difference there. Alright, that pretty much sums it up. We've settled in our 10.7 grain loading here. We're happy with that, and we'll see where we go from there. Thanks for joining us, folks.